Okay.
And seeing.
Okay, we can get this take one. Okay, it's gonna be right here, so that's the tickle spot.
That's hardly what I would call a tickle.
Oh.
Your definition of tickle is interesting. And I don't want you tickling Blair.
Oh, pinch. Pinch and burn is what I meant.
That's fair.
And then that's gonna be over here too. Right there. Burn.
Burns. Ooh, that was well burny.
Is it more than the other one?
Yeah.
It must be kind of like when you get somebody pinches the back of your arm.
It's like you put a needle in my arm.
And some burny stuff.
Yeah. Doesn't burn as much.
Weird. Because I'm just, so far I've just been looking over here.
Yeah.
And checking it out.
Prepping. Mostly prep work. I heard that's what 90% of doctor work is.
Yeah.
Is prep work.
Totally.
Oh, side note, I was listening to this podcast, and this guy, he's the CEO of Whole Foods. Oh, is that it?
Oh, yeah.
He was like being so skeptical of doctors and
Oh, really?
so believing in chiropractors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he was like, I mean, doctors don't know everything. And chiropractors, I go to a chiropractor every week, and it feels great.
And you're like, and they're not the same thing.
And guess who went to medical school?
Well, it's also, that's kind of like apples to oranges, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because cracking your joints,
I mean, obviously they're...
healing your body are two very different things.
Yeah, there's overlap. I mean, I guess the overlap is DOs, right? Because they know how to do all that manipulation stuff as well.
And it's both dealing with bodies.
Yeah.
So I guess that's overlap. Both dealing with human bodies. How's that? He was being such a chiropractor apologist. He was like, well, they have a doctorate in, what is it, chiropractology or something like that?
Chiropractic, I think.
On this thing that they made up.
I just poked you with a sharp thing, and did it hurt?
No, you didn't. I don't feel it.
Well, look next time.
So, Icarus.
Yeah.
He flew too close to the sun.
It is that? Did he have wax? Is that what it was?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
The wax held the feathers together or something?
Yeah, his dad was an inventor, and they were in Rapunzel's tower before Rapunzel was there. And then he invented the wings, and he was like, don't fly too close to the sun, because then it'll melt the wax, because that's all they had available. And he did. He
did it anyway.
Flew too close to the sun. But the documentary, so the guy who made it was like a semi-pro cyclist on a bicycle. And if there was any confusion, and he basically, what he had in mind for the documentary was he would contact people who were essentially professionals at creating doping regimens. And I suppose a professional is the most correct way to say it, because
or highly experienced at it or whatever,
because they're not technically getting paid to do that. They're probably getting paid to do other stuff, but they're also doing that anyway. So he wanted
they're like a high performance specialist.
And so he wanted to get in contact with some of those people and basically create a doping regimen for himself, and document it and race while doing it, and show how people are able to basically get past the screening measures that they have in these races, and then bring that forward afterwards and be like, look, I did doping and it helped me this much, and this is how we passed it, so you guys need to fix these things. He got put in contact.
So was he going to compare it to his old races?
Yeah.
Or like...
And the way he set it up was he did a race in France that was like a semi-pro race.
Yeah.
That was basically, I think it was the 7 toughest days of the Tour de France. And that's the whole race.
Yeah.
And he placed like 14th. So he was like a very good cyclist.
Oh, this was beforehand?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he got put in contact with this Russian dude who basically was in charge of the doping in Russia. And you didn't know that at the beginning. It was just kind of implied. But the documentary, what's interesting is it morphed into basically that Russian dude's story and them making the case to bring it forward to the anti-doping agency of how Russia had been doping in every Olympics since like 1960 something.
Whoa, really that long?
Yeah. And he basically had,
and was he saying that it was just like generally everyone was doping, or just their like star athletes, or what? I mean, I guess all Olympians are star athletes, but
yeah, it was pretty much everyone, because when he came forward, he was like, look, in Sochi, this is what we did, and this is how we beat the system, and all these Olympians got through the so-called stringent testing that was done, and I'm going to show you how they did it, and you can test it even now because you still have all that stuff. You can go back and look and
at their exact blood samples.
Yeah, and so they did it, and of the random samples that they chose, 100% had been tampered with.
That is crazy. But they were things that formerly were unable to test for. They were unable to test for, or weren't on the regimen normally, or what?
Well, some of it was just ways to kind of dilute things, and you had to put in specific like chemicals to be able to detect the things that they were doing.
Oh.
And some of it was they just straight up switched out the DNA samples or whatever urine samples that they had. They just went in and opened up the bottles, which were supposedly tamper-proof.
What? And put in other people's...
Yeah. Well, it wasn't others. It was theirs, but it was pre-doping.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Just put in legit blood.
Yeah.
Or urine or whatever.
And so he showed them how that was all done. And so originally, then the Olympic Committee was like, okay, probably they shouldn't compete in the Brazil Olympics.
Yeah.
And then...
What year was Brazil? Was that the most recent?
I think so.
Because we were supposed to have Japan just now.
Yeah, I think Sochi was 2012, right? I can't remember.
Oh.
It was recent.
Oh, Sochi was winter, though.
Yeah. So in any case, for some reason, I can't remember exactly why, but as it went along, then the Olympic Committee was like, actually, Russia can still compete, but we just won't let these specific sports compete. Or maybe it was even specific Olympians. But it doesn't matter because 100% of the tests that they randomly chose had been
were
tampered with, or would have failed the testing.
Man.
So 100% of the Olympians shouldn't have even competed from Russia.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was basically the documentary, and that Russian dude now is in witness protection because he had a buddy who I think he worked with him on this, and he was still in Russia.
Well, he was one of the trainers or whatever, or one of the specialists.
Yeah, and he had a sudden heart attack and died.
Gosh.
And so
and then was cremated the next day.
And so that
I made that up. I don't know if that's true.
So that dude, he was in America. He came to America when all that stuff started going down.
The one in witness protection, or the other?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then after all of that went down and he did all the testifying and stuff, then he went into witness protection. And so now he's in witness protection. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because if there's like no health downside, first of all, where do you draw the line in doping? Because with Lance Armstrong, it was like O2 doping, right?
I can't remember, to get just more red blood cells or something.
Yeah, it wasn't like he was taking supplements. He was, I mean, I suppose he was supplementing his blood.
No. Weren't they getting blood transfusions or something? Or not transfusions, like their own transfusion, their own blood transfused back into him, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't like it was foreign.
It wasn't a drug.
Yeah, drugs that were coming in to give a boost. It was their own.
Yeah.
So where do you think the line is with
right, if you want to say, okay, well,
steroids?
let's have it be natural, only natural, but then what is that?
Yeah, because then like what supplements can you not have? What vitamins,
Yeah, can you not take
and like testosterone and creatine and things like that, it's
right. They're not like, you make creatine yourself,
Yeah.
but you don't make tons of it like you would take.
Yeah, and testosterone, like, and even with that, there's people who produce more or less testosterone than others.
Yeah, and testosterone.
Yeah.
You said testosterone.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's like a fancy one. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
Testosterone is totally...
So it's, I don't know, how do they decide where to draw the line?
Yeah.
And then in that same vein...
I mean, at the very least, they would have to say, okay, here's a list of allowed supplements or whatever. Like, you can take these vitamins and these whatever. I mean, maybe they already have something like that, or a do not list or something.
And I think even... I definitely heard something about albuterol.
Really?
Yeah. Because if you don't have asthma, then it's just a stimulant.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, it's complicated. And in that same vein, like, why should steroids and performance enhancing drugs not be allowed? I suppose if it's dangerous, that's one thing. But if it's safe,
steroids aren't good for people. But
but if it's like HGH, for example, that's pretty safe, right?
HGH?
Yeah, human growth hormones.
Well, I haven't seen like studies done on it. I know that there are uses for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like kids often will get prescribed HGH if they're just kind of what's the word?
Stunted or not?
Yeah, like developmentally are going to be rather small.
Yeah.
Then they can get prescribed HGH because it helps kind of jumpstart their growth, right?
Ooh, I saw something about that for people with dwarfism, that there's something that can stimulate their growth while they're still young.
Wow.
And they can grow taller, not to like standard size, but...
And were the proportions still...
I don't know. Actually, it was a podcast I was listening to, so I don't see any imagery, but that was controversial apparently because it's basically like saying the person that had dwarfism that was being interviewed was saying it's offensive because then it's basically saying there's something wrong with you,
right,
and that you need to fix it,
Yeah, there's an interesting culture within dwarfism because like even wearing like platform shoes or anything like that is very frowned upon.
Yeah. There were some of the things that when I listened to her talk about it, I things that you just don't think about it when you're not affected by it directly or near your family or whatever. But, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, to think about, and that would make sense to do what she's talking about. Like one of them is just think about more regularly in all kinds of construction that we do, accommodating smaller people.
Yeah.
Which
and
basically,
wheelchairs.
which basically you can do a lot of times for a person in a wheelchair as well. Like you
Yeah.
have a bank counter that's down
Yeah.
at a height that accommodates both
Mm-hmm.
people. Anyway, so stuff like that, I think, well, yeah, why not do that? But what's hard for me when I was listening to her is kind of those other, I don't know what you call it, like social, like that concept of that being offensive if somebody, you know, gives their child that medication that helps them grow taller.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like those things are harder. It's hard to understand. But somehow it feels tied to just any of the uncomfortable truths in our culture right now, and how people don't want to, you know, that's a hard, it's just a hard topic in general, because people don't want to, you know, don't want to feel like there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, I can understand the argument for sure, but it's not necessarily that you're saying something's wrong. It's just
like, let's make your life easier.
Yeah, because that's exactly the point where she's saying, if she's saying, you know, there's things in life that are not, what is the correct term that she would say, dwarf friendly? Something like that?
I don't know.
Like the stairs or something?
Accommodate,
Yeah, it's like, well, then how about if, rather than changing something like the whole system, why don't you just have something that can help you adapt to that system so it makes your life easier?
Yeah.
And it's not going to harm you.
Yeah, and not even just that change the whole system. It's just that, you know, there are going to be situations where they don't have that counter that low, or they don't, or whatever it is, you know? And so then you would at least it would just make things, and especially because a lot of those things are just mundane things. And it's like, I have to deal with this extra hurdle just to go to the bank or whatever it is, you know?
Driving a car.
Yeah, exactly. She did talk about cars and but I think also people, when she talked about it being offensive, like saying that there's something wrong with her or anyone with dwarfism, it's you know, there's a whole spectrum of reacting to that, like being proud of it or that sort of thing. But I feel like it's it's hard to tell where that comes from, but it strikes me as in some cases that it's coming from a place of insecurity, and that in order to somehow, it's like people have to prove themselves by saying they're proud of it, or no, it's great, or I prefer it, or whatever. Which I guess you can't know if you prefer it if you haven't had both, but but it just seems like there are ways to just be more realistic about it and say, look, the reality is it's way easier. It's one less thing to worry about if you're standard size or close to it. And again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't accommodate people of all heights and everything, but it doesn't. I guess it almost bothers me that is offensive, isn't it? I don't know how else to describe that, you know. But I don't know, because
it's not.
I don't know what it's like to experience that. So.
Well, like you said, it's one less thing, but it's also way more than one less thing to worry about.
Right. It affects so many things.
Yeah, it's clothes, driving cars, going to the bathroom. Like, it's hard to find. Like, you're better off finding things where you're not affected. You know.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so
that's true, because even toilets, like urinals, forget it.
Yeah.
Like all kinds of things like that we don't think about, because we're thinking about other things while we just go to the bathroom. We don't think about.
And shopping, if you want to get something on a higher up shelf.
Yeah.
And nobody's there.
Yeah.
and having to ask someone to
all
help
the time.
you get something all the time from the
Yeah,
higher up
when you're
shelves.
40 years old.
Yeah.
Which even just people that aren't tall sometimes have to do that, but it's not nearly as often.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
So going back to the doping thing.
Oh yeah.
Because I talked to a doctor in my neighborhood about this a couple years back, and
about like what might be acceptable or
yeah,
that kind of thing.
and why, if it's healthy, if there's no like adverse effects from it, what is the reason to not have performance enhancing anything?
Yeah.
What do you think would be the argument against that?
Well, I mean, I guess one of them would be like in the Olympics is just access to it, you know? I mean, for sure, there's going to be countries that can't afford to do all the things, especially if they're, you know, if it's like a small country or poorer country, or in that particular, you know, like that athlete doesn't have a good chance of like winning a medal or something. Are they even going to have the resources? And if they did, are they going to use them on that athlete? You know, I don't know.
But that could be said of everything.
The trainers and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If poor countries don't have the same access to the training equipment.
Yeah.
And that includes like the actual, you know, track and field.
Well,
things.
so I guess it would just make the divide even bigger. That's probably what some people would argue. You know, they'd say that's just like how the divide is bigger between poor and rich people.
Yeah.
You know, and that gets bigger. Although I have to say that even though if that divide's getting bigger in this country, at least everybody's been getting richer, even poor people, which is good.
It kind of related to that. I've been listening to the Apocalypse Never.
Oh yeah, I like that book.
And he brings up some interesting things, but he doesn't actually address like climate change as much as I thought he would, or maybe should.
In what way? Like what to do about it, or just that it's...
No, because like, for example, the argument where people who are climate change activists will say for like developing countries is, are you done with both of them?
Wait, just a sec. Yeah.
Okay. Is they should leapfrog the steps that we had to take to get to where we are.
Oh, right.
And just start implementing green stuff right away.
Developed nations want that.
Yeah.
And it's unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he explains the reasoning why they need to go through each thing, and it helps the countries as a whole.
Yeah, to become industrialized and all of it, yeah.
But it has nothing to do with, he doesn't address the climate part of it at all.
Right, I think that was him just basically saying that's one of the ways that we have to be fair and realistic about it when we're talking about what we are going to do about climate change. You know, because basically that it's not fair on, you know, multiple levels to expect that or demand that of developing nations when we got to do whatever the heck we wanted, you know, and on our timeline, on a natural timeline.
I think I still have an eighth of it left.
Probably the biggest thing that I remember him talking about that I did find interesting, and I would like to know more about it as far as what to do, is where we source our electricity. And basically he's saying, you know, did he talk about the, not hierarchy, is it a hierarchy? But basically the steps, the stages, like burning wood, then coal, then natural gas, and then nuclear.
Yeah.
Anyway, basically what he was saying is that that if we want abundant, clean energy, nuclear is the way to go, and that we have to go over.
But that could blow up.
Yeah, get over our fears of it. because the reality is, especially when it comes to deaths, the reality is that not, from accident, like radiation exposure, that sort of thing, the number of deaths are so minimal that it's not even really an argument, and even in cases like that were, devastating accidents, like in Chernobyl, that was partly due to who built those reactors and who ran them and the way they did it. It was those types of failures versus just that it was nuclear. It wasn't nuclear's fault, basically.
Yeah.
But I thought that book was interesting because I think it's what I liked about it is that he's able to find more middle ground than most people, or most discussions about climate are not anywhere near any kind of middle ground. You know what I mean? Yeah. Beloved. And the fact that he has been like a climate activist for decades.
Yeah. And
then basically, that was my biggest takeaway, other than the, nuclear energy, is that both extremes are very harmful. Like those far extremes, like super climate alarmists is harmful, alarmism is harmful, and then denial, or whatever you want to call it, basically not caring at all about the environment is harmful too.
Yeah. I would much rather have a conversation with, I think a good term for them is a climate realist.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's the same as the political sphere. Like, you can't have a conversation with anyone who's too far on either side. What are the names?
Oh, it's like a gummy bear gingerbread.
Yeah.
Ginger.
Ginger
and it's like a little bean, kidney bean. Oh, or shrimp, but no tail.
I don't know. I can't think of
Giblet.
It. Ginger and Giblet?
Yeah, in honor of Thanksgiving. Ginger and Giblet. Welcome to the world.
Oh, that's so cute. Shoot, there's something that I was going to say. Oh, one thing that I don't like about the conversation with anything climate related is even I had a conversation with the coworker of mine.
Yeah.
And he's not a climate activist, but he's pretty left.
Yeah.
And he basically was like, we have to, we're headed for disaster and we have to do something about it. And Paris Accords is, one of the step ones that we could do. And then we need to, reduce all the things and maybe Green New Deal, some of that stuff. So that we can fix the problem. And I'm like, but that's the thing though. It's not fixing the problem. That's slowing the problem down. That's not fixing the problem.
And it's like just spending a ton of money.
And losing a ton of money too.
Yeah.
There's people who would be hugely harmed from it because they need the money. Workers and stuff.
That was the other thing that I liked about that book, is he did address solar and wind power and how environmentally destructive those are.
Yeah.
Like literally on the land.
Yeah.
Whereas like you can do one nuclear plant on such a tiny amount of land and
do way more
electricity.
Yeah.
But that's the problem, is people try to double and triple down on some of those things that sound like a great fantasy. And I think in certain
because it's natural.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that I thought was
natural.
good that he brought up. He was like, just because something's natural doesn't mean that it's better.
Yeah.
And with like the sea turtle shells and stuff.
Well, yeah, and like wind and solar aren't really natural anyway. You're using electronics, you're using you know, batteries, all kinds of stuff. Not to mean we shouldn't use them, but because I feel like in certain situations, solar and wind are great, you know, but if you're talking about powering a nation of 330 million people, that's not realistic and likely more damaging, you know. But people get so hyper focused on those things and just assume or don't care, and they're like, that's what we're going to push, and we're going to do more and more and more and more of that, even though it's like providing like 1 or 2% of our electricity right now.
The thing that was weird with that conversation with my coworker was what it came down to was we had different definitions of fixing the problem. Because what he was saying was fixing the problem, and by my definition was not fixing the problem. And I gave the example of, if you've got a toilet that's overflowing, if you reduce the overflowing, you still have a toilet that's overflowing. And so you didn't fix the problem, you just slowed down the overflowing. To fix the problem, you have to stop the actual overflowing of the toilet. For some reason he said that was a terrible analogy, and I'm like, it's not. If the globe is warming up and you slow down the warming of the globe, it's still warming up, it's just doing it slower. So you didn't fix it, you just slowed it down.
You fixed it for your generation maybe, or something, you like fended it off or whatever.
And so what I've never understood is why the conversation is just of slowing it down. Why not actually fixing it, finding ways to fix it? And that would probably involve reversing it, because if you can reverse it, then you can control it. And so find ways of how to reverse the anthropomorphic change that's been caused, so that you can then, you know, let it go forward sometimes and slow it down, or reverse it other times.
Well, and that's the other thing, is try to figure out how we can have less of an impact. And then obviously climate is still going to change like it does over decades and, or, you know, centuries and millennia or whatever. But I think that we don't have to become micromanagers of the climate. Like we can figure out other things to do, like maybe not building stick-framed homes in Florida. Or, you know, he talked about that too, like that the disasters aren't really getting more numerous or more violent. It's just that nobody lived in Florida on the beach, you know? We just keep rebuilding. We've built and built and built in those places that get devastated by hurricanes.
Like with New Orleans.
So there's billions of dollars in damage because you built billions of dollars of worth of stuff in the path of hurricanes.
In a way that, like, it's fine if you're going to build billions of dollars stuff, if it's going to be able to withstand the stuff that is going to come there. It's like the people in the Midwest with tornadoes. It's like, I've never understood, like, what if there's so many tornadoes there all the time, maybe just don't live where there's tornadoes.
Or, I mean, at the very least, you have to have a bunker or something, I don't know, or build out of concrete or something.
But with the New Orleans, that was like
building below sea level,
particularly dumb. Where they're like, we built it to withstand a 1 in 100 year hurricane that could happen, and Denmark is like, we built ours to withstand 1 in 10,000 years or something like that. And it's like, well, it only happens 1 in 100 years, and I'm already 75, so
I'm good.
It's almost already gone, so I don't have to worry about it. So
well, and also, why rebuild those whole neighborhoods that are down under sea level? Like,
go back there, do it again.
That just seems.
And
different. Again, build not something that can withstand even the flooding. It's something that will rot and get ruined again if it floods, or it's knocked over, gets the roof ripped off or whatever.
You know what it all boils down to? People are just stupid. Always. That's what pretty much everything boils down to.
Stupid.
People are stupid.
They're stupid. They're stupid. They're stupid. They're stupid.
So, on that lovely note, happy Thanksgiving.